Week 10 of the fantasy football season, and here starts as sits every matchup for running backs this week in Week 10. The first matchup, the Atlanta Falcons at the Carolina Panthers on Thursday Night Football. So Cordell Patterson, he came back last week. He found the end zone in that ball game, and I'm definitely going to start Patterson. These two teams versus 2 weeks ago, and both running backs on both teams had nice ball games. So right here, Cordell Patterson, I'll give the start. Tyrell G, I know he rushed 10 carries, 99 yards in the last ball game here, but Tyrell G, I'm going to give a sit because we don't know how many carries he's going to get. Like I said, Cordell Patterson, he's back now for this Falcon team, and if they're getting eased into the role with so short yardage and goal line back, number one over there. And Algie, I don't know if he's going to have a good game once again. Now to the Panthers, Donta Foreman, 2 out of 3 ball games. He's been real good for fantasy owners since he's got an expanded role since the Christian McCaffrey trade. And this week here, I think Foreman once again gets back on track. We saw him score 3 touchdowns and have over 30 fantasy points in Week 8 versus the same Falcon defense. And now with this ball game in Carolina, I think Foreman could have a good ball game in this one. And I got him as a start. And Chuba Hubbard said he's going to play in this game. And if he does, him and Foreman will probably split. And obviously Hubbard will be the passing downs and third down back. So right now I got Hubbard as a borderline option. We don't know how that ankle is going to hold up. We don't know the workload and the snap shares for both of these guys. So right now, I'll go with the short thing and the short yardage and goal line guy in Donta Foreman this week. Now to the Seattle Seahawks at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Germany. First game ever in NFL history in Germany. And right now, Kenneth Walker, he's matchup proof. He's a top 10 running back, in my opinion, each and every week. Just the explosiveness and the patience in the hole for Walker. This guy could break out a big run, 60, 70 yards any game, any time. And this week, he's an obvious start. Now to the Bucs, things getting interesting over here in the backfield for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Fournette and Rachaad White, it's getting close as White's getting more work as the weeks have gone on over the last 4 or 5 weeks here. And White even out-touched Leonard Fournette last week. But right now, I like this matchup for Fournette and the Bucs. This defense over there in Seattle don't stop anyone. So I'm going to give Fournette the nod in this one. And Rachaad White, it's a flex option if you're really desperate, or number 2 running back, even more desperate in fantasy leagues here. I got him as a borderline option because if he could get more work, he's a good receiver out of the backfield, and in PPR leagues he gets you anywhere from 10 to 12 fantasy points, which is not a horrible number, especially if you got a lot of buys or your team's just struggling. So White's a borderline option for me. But like I said, we could see 10 to 12 touches for him in this ball game. Denver Broncos at the Titans. So right now, it's a tough backfield to map out over there in Denver. They traded for Chase Edmonds in the Chubb deal, getting a first-round pick, and then Edmonds coming over as well from the Dolphins. So right now, Latavius Murray, I think he's locked in as the goal line back and short yardage back. And he's a guy that's looked good so far since the Broncos signed him off the Saints practice squad. So Murray, I got as a borderline option. Melvin Gordon, I still think he's going to get work as well, but he's a borderline option as a guy that you're hoping he could get you anywhere from 8 to 12 fantasy points is Melvin Gordon this week here. But it's a pretty tough matchup versus solid and stout defense in the Tennessee Titans. So I got them both borderline guys. And for Chase Edmonds, it's his first week here as a Denver Bronco. We'll see what type of role he has. But right now, I have no confidence to put him out there in my starting lineup. So obviously, stash him on your bench and see what he could do this week here. But he's a guy I have as a sit. Now, Derrick Henry, it don't matter the matchup. Best running back this season in between the tackles, in my opinion, is Derrick Henry. And over the last few weeks here, he's had 25 or more fantasy points easily as Derrick Henry. And he's going to have another big game even versus a tough defense like the Broncos this week. So you start him, obviously. Cleveland Browns at the Dolphins. So right now, Nick Chubb, another guy, doesn't matter the matchup, leading a lot of categories at the running back position this season here. And he's a must start. Now to his running back backup, Kareem Hunt, he's a borderline option. Hunt's only had 2 good games, really, out of the first 8 this season here for the Cleveland Browns. And I thought Hunt was going to get traded at the NFL trade deadline, but obviously that didn't come to fruition. And if he did, he's a starter pretty much, and more than half the league here is Kareem Hunt. But this week here, in a mediocre matchup, I got him as a borderline option versus the Dolphins. Now to the Dolphins side of things, I like both running backs this week here starts. And last week, both guys produced, even though Jeff Wilson Jr. had the fantasy day here for this Miami Dolphin team. So right here, he obviously was under McDaniel with the 49ers. And get the snaps 50-50. So right here, Mostert, more the short yard guy, and Jeff Wilson, more the guy that does a little bit of everything. Could catch the ball out of the backfield, could get that burst run for you. And I like the matchup here for both guys versus this Brown defense. And they starts this week now to the New Orleans Saints at the Steelers. ALVIN KAMARA, I know he had a down game on Monday Night Football in Week 9, but I think he'll bounce back in this one. This Steelers defense really hasn't done much, even though TJ Watt possibly could come back in this ball game. Still, ALVIN KAMARA is a guy you're starting each and every week here, and you give him the nod. Down to the Steelers, Najee Harris. He's been putting up number 2 running back numbers, is Harris. I know you drafted him in the first, second round of most fantasy leagues, and he's a bit of bust in that terms, but at least he's putting up 10, 12 fantasy points a week. I know it's not much in PPR leagues, especially with a first pick overall, but teams are surviving still with Najee Harris being a bust this season. But right now, reports have come out that his backup, Jalen Warren, is going to get more work. And that usually happens after the bye week. A lot of rookies in offenses do get more work. So Warren, he's looked like a pretty decent back. Definitely a better receiver out of the backfield, in my opinion, than a Najee Harris. And right now, Warren in deeper leagues is definitely a borderline option. But it wouldn't be surprising to me if this backfield turns to a 60-40 Harris's favor, or even a 50-50 as the season goes on now. And with the Steelers team trying to evaluate young talent as well. Lions at the Chicago Bears. So right here, DeAndre Swift. I know it's been tough for him. I know he hasn't played 100% and played all the snaps here. But right now, I think this week here in a pretty good matchup versus Chicago Bears that we just saw the Miami Dolphins run all over. Swift could get back on track. And Dan Campbell even said he's progressing, but obviously not going to get 100% of the touches. And Jamal Williams, he usually's had good games versus the Chicago Bears over the last couple seasons here with the Green Bay Packers and now the Detroit Lions. So Jamal Williams is a number 2 running back or a flex option. He's a guy you can count on this week here. And I got him as a start. And obviously he's getting the short yardage and goal line work. It just only takes 50, 60 yards and a touchdown here for a decent fantasy day at a number 2 running back or a flex option. I think Jamal Williams definitely could do it this week. Now to the Bears side of things, Khalil Herbert I like is the better running back over here in Chicago. In my opinion, he's more explosive, better running back. I know Montgomery's a hard runner. He fights for every yard and tries, but I just think Khalil Herbert fits his scheme better with replay options and stuff like that with Justin Fields, who's really taken off over the last 3 weeks of the season. So Herbert in this one I have as a start, number 2 flex option this week. And David Montgomery, his counterpart, I got him as a borderline option. Like I said, Montgomery runs hard. He tries hard, no doubt about it, but the juice just hasn't been there this season here with big fantasy games. He's only had 2 good fantasy games, is David Montgomery, and the rest have been mediocre to poor. So this week here, in the middle of the pack matchup versus the Lions. I know the Lions versus the pass game, one of the worst teams in the league, but right here versus the run, I think they can make a few plays at least. I got him as a borderline option. Now to the Minnesota Vikings at the Buffalo Bills. Dalvin Cook, he's a top running back drafted this season in the first round. Top 5, top 6 overall. And he's matchup proof, even in a tough matchup versus the Bills in Buffalo. Even though we saw Michael Carter and James Robinson have good games, which could be good for Cook. So I got Cook as a start now. To Buffalo side of things, Devin Singletary. In this one, I could see a lot of dump-offs to him, obviously. He's still the number 1 back over there. Nyheim Hines, they did trade for at the trade deadline, but I don't think he was up to snuff on the playbook, and that's why he didn't play much, and we saw more James Cook in the ball game. But anyway, Singletary, I'm giving the start. Just his receiving prowess out of the backfield could get you into 10, 11 fantasy points. Minimum just doing that here, not even running between the tackles. So right here, I got him as a start. And Nyheim Hines this week here, I have him as a sit. Maybe he's up to par with the playbook, but still, he's a guy, just out his whole career's been hot and cold. One good week, one game he disappears. Even though I like the matchup here for the Bills, it adds another weapon for Josh Allen to throw to on checkdowns, or even a guy that can line up in the slot from time to time. So Hines, I got as a sit. Now to the Houston Texans at the Giants. Both these running backs you're starting each and every week. Not much to say about these games. I know Pierce is a rookie. I know he's going to have his up and downs, but it's a perfect number 2 running back on your fantasy roster. You can't go wrong. And this Giant team, we've seen them get shredded a few times on the ground this season by the Dallas Cowboys and the Baltimore Ravens. a few weeks ago. And Saquon Barkley, with a bounce-back season it's been for him, and obviously a contract season is why, in my opinion, he's playing a lot and not getting injured. He's looking for that big money, and he's been a money-making player for fantasy owners this season. So right here, he's a definite start. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Kansas City Chiefs. So Travis Etienne, ever since he's gotten the starting reins for this Jacksonville Jaguar team, he's been a top 5 running back in fantasy football over the last 3 weeks after James Robinson traded to the New York Jets. Even in a tough matchup at Kansas City, we're going to be chasing points. He's going to get a lot of passes out of the backfield. They're still going to give him 15-20 touches no matter what the game script says, I think, here for Etienne and this Jaguar team. And he's a must-start every week. Now to the Chiefs side of things, a murky situation over there with a 3 running back committee. Jared McKinnon, I think he's the best bet of a guy doing anything on this team because he's a passing downs back. They're pass-happy offense, no doubt about it, over there in Kansas City. And Jared McKinnon, in a pinch here, he's maybe a guy in PPR leagues that could get you 7 or 8 fantasy points this week with 4 teams on bye. So I got him at borderline. And Isaiah Pacheco, he was named the starter a few weeks ago, but he's still only getting 5 to 8 touches per game. And obviously you're not going to get production when you're only getting a limited amount of touches. So right now there was a lot of hype about Pacheco coming into the season, but it just hasn't been there for him. Even though in the few games he's gotten decent workload, he's looked pretty good, but he's a sitting. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I've been saying it for weeks, he was a touchdown dependent running back, and that's obviously come to fruition where over the last few weeks here, if he hasn't found the end zone, he's only scoring 5 or 6 fantasy points. So right now you can't trust him in this matchup, even though it's a good one versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. And right here this week, Hilaire's a sit. Once again, the next game, Indianapolis Colts at the Las Vegas Raiders. Here, pretty simple. This Raider defense, middle of the pack defense. Jonathan Taylor plays, you're going to start him, even though it's been a bust year for the first overall pick in most fantasy leagues here. And if Deion Jackson's going to be the starter with Taylor out, I'd give him a start as well. This Raider team, not great against the run. Travis Etienne, we just saw him go over 100 yards once again in that ball game. And right here, Taylor, if he plays, I think he could have a decent game. Maybe 80, 90 total yards and a touchdown. Now to the Raiders side of things, Josh Jacobs, he was on a tear for a few weeks in a row, but last week came back down to earth with about 12 fantasy points in that ball game at the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this week here in a pretty decent matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts, and a guy that I would start pretty much every week unless you got better options. But who's better than you then if you do? You're going to start Josh Jacobs every week, so he's a start. Now to the Arizona Cardinals at the Rams. James Conner came back. Obviously he wasn't 100% for this Cardinal team, but he's still a guy that could put up decent number 2 fantasy numbers. And we saw last season with him with the monster year, I believe 18 touchdowns it was for Conner. So even in not the greatest of matchups at the division rival Los Angeles Rams, I got Conner as a start this week. Now to the messy situation over here in Los Angeles. None of these guys I like as a starter because no one is really getting the full workload, or at least getting a good timeshare with 15-20 touches a game, with another guy coming in for 8 to 10 touches. So right here, Darrell Henderson, he was the leader in the backfield after getting out-snapped a couple weeks ago by Ronnie Rivers. But Henderson, I still think's the back over there. He's still a guy that can make a few plays, and this team, they just need something besides Cooper Kupp to show up on this offense. But anyway, this week here, even in a pretty decent matchup, I got Darrell Henderson, a borderline option. Kyren Williams, we know he's going to get an expanded role once he returns from the injured reserve, and this week could be that week he returns, but he's still a guy, obviously, I'm not going to count on. I'm going to take a wait-and-see approach with him, and I got him borderline. And now Cam Akers, he came back. A lot of people thought he was going to get a lot of run in that Week 9 game at Tampa Bay, but that wasn't the case, and you can't count on Cam Akers. He hasn't done much throughout his NFL career. I know the Achilles injury was a big one for him, and it takes time to recover, but right here, Week 10 in crunch time, there's no way you're playing him, and he's a sit. And Ronnie Rivers, he was a factor a few weeks ago for this Los Angeles Ram team, but last week wasn't a factor at all at Tampa Bay, and he's a sit this week. Now to the Dallas Cowboys at the Green Bay Packers. So the Cowboys here coming off a bye week, trying to be refreshed, and they got a great 2 running backs over there. Ezekiel Elliott, I know his numbers haven't been up to snuff over the last few seasons, but he's still a guy that could go out there, still could get a couple goal line touchdowns, put up some fantasy points. And this week here in a good matchup at the Packers, I like Zeke, and Tony Pollard I think's better than Zeke though at this point. We saw him get the start a couple weeks ago versus the Bears. And he went off for a monster game, over 100 total yards in that one. And finding the end zone twice at Tony Pollard is a flex option. The number 2 running back is perfect this week. And this Cowboy team, they want to run the football a little more this season after last year getting out of hand a little bit, throwing it way too much. So right now, this team's 6-2. Dak Prescott, I still don't think's 100%. And if they want to set the tone and play action in this one, you run both these running backs, and they're a great tandem. So I like him this week. Aaron Jones, obviously, if he plays in this game, he's matchup proof. And a guy you got to go out there and start every week. He's a top 12, 15 running back each and every week here is Aaron Jones. And this week here, even in a tough matchup, if he plays versus a great Dallas Cowboy front line here, I give him a start. Now to A.J. Dillon, if Jones is out, he's going to be the starter, obviously. But one way or the other, he's still a borderline play to me, is A.J. Dillon. This season, I thought would be the breakout year for Dillon, but he really hasn't done much of anything here. And you can't trust him, especially in a crucial Week 10 matchup in your fantasy league here. So right now, he's a guy this week here I can't trust. Put up a decent game, and at best, he's a borderline option if Aaron Jones misses the ball game. The Angeles Chargers at the 49ers. Both these running backs, top 5 guys every week. And there's not much to say. Austin Eckler's been on a tear with 9 touchdowns over the last 4 ball games. So he's a start, obviously, and their main weapon in Los Angeles. In San Francisco, Christian McCaffrey picking up that playbook pretty quickly in his second week a few weeks ago, and throwing a touchdown, running a touchdown, and receiving a touchdown. So he's the total package. And the only thing it's been with McCaffrey is health. But if he stays healthy, he's a top 2 or 3 running back remainder of the season. So he's a start, obviously, this week. Final game, Monday Night Football, Washington Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles. So Antonio Gibson, he's been decent out of the backfield receiving the football over the last few weeks. And this week here, I have him as a borderline option. It's a tough matchup and a stiff matchup at this Philadelphia Eagle team. But right here, this Eagle team, they could be vulnerable through the pass in the air. But right now, Antonio Gibson, it's been a hot and cold type of season for him. But this week here, he's a borderline option because of the defense. Now, Brian Robinson, a lot of hype coming into the season about him as a good running back for this Commander team. But so far, I haven't seen it. And I know it's still early in the process here for Robinson, but he's a sit and a guy I can't trust. Obviously, he's going to get short yardage work, but how many times has this Commander team really been in the red zone where they got the opportunity to give Robinson the ball? So this week here, Gibson, I like him because of the receiving prowess and a game where they're going to be chasing points. So he's minimum borderline this week here is Gibson. And now to the Philadelphia Eagles side of things, Miles Sanders, he's been a solid number 2 running back pretty much the whole season for fantasy owners. And last week, 15 fantasy points, even though he left some on the bone out there was Miles Sanders. And we even saw Kenneth Gainwell take a goal line stopper from him in that one. But anyways, a number 2 running back and in a solid matchup versus the Washington Commanders. He's a start this week, so that's week 10 of the fantasy football season. Every matchup, running backs starts or sits.